2017 has been one of the best years in gaming in a long time. The last time I can remember a year this good was 2011, with games like Dark Souls, Skyrim, Deus Ex, and Portal 2, and many other games. So you know what that means. Time for another person to make a top 10 list video. So these are my top 10 games of 2017. Remember, this is completely subjective and just my personal opinion. My very correct opinion. Before I start, I want to bring up some games that aren't on my list simply because I didn't have a chance to play them or play them long enough to feel like I could accurately rate them. Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus, Prey, Destiny 2, Assassin's Creed Origins, Player Unknown, Battleground, For Honor, Shadow of Microtransactions, South Park, The Fractured but Uncharted, Hollow Knight. Additionally, I only played a few hours of Horizon Zero Dawn, and while what I played was good, I don't feel like I know it well enough to rank it. Number 10, Nier Automata. Automata. One of those. I think for this one, my expectations may have been a little too high, as I've had friends and viewers telling me it was their game of the year or one of the top games of the year. That said, it's a fun action RPG merging bullet hell mechanics with what would otherwise be standard action gameplay. Nier focuses on an ongoing war between androids and machines. The androids who have been fighting for humankind, and machines fighting for alienkind, who in the past invaded Earth to try and take it over. While that's the base plot, the game is really more so about what it means to be alive and conscious, as the formerly robotic machines start to display more and more self-awareness. The game includes multiple storylines which take place after first completion of the game, all helping further explain the story and sometimes adding new gameplay mechanics. All of that said, I didn't personally love the gameplay. A lot of times I felt like I was playing to move things along, more so than because I was enjoying it. Number 9, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. A few years back, Team Ninja decided to break away from using a publisher and focused on creating their own high-quality indie game. I'm not sure if it's fair to call it indie, as they have been a major team, but they did independently publish the game, so decide what you will on the terminology. What resulted was an artistic action game about a picked warrior with a mental illness. You play the game from her perspective and are never quite sure what's real and what's just in her mind as you arrive at the coast of Helheim in order to save the soul of her dead lover. The gameplay consists of a mix of action and puzzles, with both elements being fun in their own right. The story is well crafted and told, and the entire experience is well worth your time. Number 8, A Hat in Time. I kickstarted A Hat in Time so long ago, I can't even remember the year it was. It remains one of the very few games I've kickstarted, and I'm glad I did. While the game started off a little slow for me, as it took some time to get comfortable with the mechanics of it, it quickly charmed me so thoroughly that it easily became one of my top 10 games of the year. A Hat in Time is similar to platform collectathon games of the past, and I would say most similar to Mario Sunshine. You collect various timepieces throughout each stage. However, collecting one will boot you out of the stage, as each mission typically slightly restructures the level to keep things fresh. There are only 4 main stages in A Hat in Time, but each of them are entirely unique, and my personal favorite was a train robbery mission, which was a comedic murder mystery. Also, there's one mission where you're in a haunted mansion being stalked by an angry spirit, and somehow the game manages to jump from being charming and cute to terrifying, which I loved. A Hat in Time is much more of a platform game than Mario Odyssey, which is an element I thoroughly enjoyed, and while Yooka-Laylee disappointed in 2017, A Hat in Time exceeded my expectations. Number 7, Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. I debated whether or not Crash Bandicoot deserved to be on this list simply because it's a remaster of an old game, but when it comes down to how much enjoyment I got out of the game, I can't deny just how much I loved replaying through all 3 games with their gorgeous new graphics. The games were fantastic when they first released, and as the trilogy shows, their gameplay still stands the test of time. One thing worth noting is that the physics are slightly different, and while this actually improves Crash Bandicoot 1, it does make jumping feel slightly off and heavy, and makes some previously easy platforms to jump far more difficult to make. If you enjoy platform games, and especially if you've never played Crash Bandicoot, this game is a must. Also, apparently the games are now Dark Souls. It's pretty much the same thing, so maybe that's why I enjoyed them. Number 6, Cuphead. The latest sequel to Dark Souls deviates pretty heavily from its predecessors. Instead of being an action RPG, Cuphead is an action shooter game in the style of Contra or Gunstar Heroes. It was also made by a completely different team, was an indie game in the works for around 7 years, and has absolutely no resemblance to Dark Souls. As is immediately obvious when watching the gameplay, Cuphead is visually stunning, taking inspiration from cartoons of the 1930s. And since some cartoons of the 1930s were racist, Cuphead is also racist. So, a racist sequel to Dark Souls? I'm in. Number 5, Resident Evil 7. After the Silent Hills demo, PT was released and scared me shitless. I noticed Resident Evil 7 decided to take a turn and would instead be first person. To me, it seemed like it was blatantly shifting styles to match the wild success of PT. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. While I love the original Resident Evil, and Resident Evil 4 remains my favorite in the series, the Resident Evil 4 formula hadn't really been working in their subsequent games. So with Resident Evil 7, Capcom returns to the true horror of the original Resident Evil games, now with a first-person perspective. While the plot isn't the most interesting, you're searching for your wife who is presumed dead and who you've now received a message from, the horror is absolutely there. There are moments that I actually screamed out loud while playing the game, and that doesn't happen for me. While the game ran a little long for me, overall, I was completely invested in each task the game presented with me, while dreading what was around each corner. There are plenty of puzzles to solve and places to explore for secrets and extra ammo, which all added to my overall enjoyment of the game. Number 4, Mario Odyssey. I've always been a huge Mario fan, and while my favorite Mario games remain the original 2D installments, as I absolutely love 2D platformer games, the main 3D series has always been an absolute blast, and I would argue Mario 64 invented the 3D collectathon genre. Mario Odyssey takes the collectathon ideas of former Mario games and ramps it up to an extreme. There are over 800 moons to collect in the game, some easier than others, and while Mario can still platform like a rock star, the platforming in this game has taken a major backseat to collecting. It's a design decision that not everyone will love, but I didn't mind as it's so well executed. Mario Odyssey became a game I could just sit down and relax to. It's rarely stressful, and I don't think there was any point in playing Mario Odyssey I felt bored or wasn't enjoying myself running around collecting everything humanly possible. While I enjoyed Super Mario 3D World on the Wii U, I found just about every Mario game since the introduction of the new Super Mario Bros. Series to be disappointing, outside of Mario Maker, but I'm not sure if you can count that as a real Mario game as it's more of a tool set. All that said, not only did Mario Odyssey not disappoint me, but it revived my faith in the franchise. While the new Super Mario Bros. Games felt stale and formulaic, Mario Odyssey felt fresh and creative. I hope that it's a positive sign of things to come, and it's really helped bolster the great lineup the Nintendo Switch already has. Number 3, Neo. I feel like since Neo came out so early in 2017, many people have forgotten about it. But don't worry, Neo, I haven't forgotten you. Neo takes elements of Dark Souls, and I'm not saying this ironically this time, and mashes them with elements of Ninja Gaiden to create something of its own. Whereas Dark Souls is methodical and careful in its combat, Neo incorporates Ninja Gaiden-esque combos into this system to make a much faster-paced combat. The story takes place in feudal Japan, where you're thrust into the war between Tokugawa Ieyasu and Ishida Mitsunari. And while the story can be a little goofy at times, I actually did learn about this period of history through playing, so that's always a nice plus. Neo has been pretty divisive between Souls fans as to how good it is. For my part, I adored the game, and while I wouldn't put it at the same level as Dark Souls or Bloodborne, I do think it stands on its own as one of the top games of 2017. Number 2, Persona 5. This one's a little sad to me, because almost any other year, Persona 5 would easily be the game of the year for me. I also almost didn't play it, and I'm glad I did. My roommate is a giant Persona fan, and while I've watched him play Persona 4, and it seems like a game I would enjoy, I never got around to it as JRPGs can be so long, and as it's such a time commitment. Fast forward to this year, and I bought him Persona 5 as a birthday present, but wasn't really planning on playing it myself. Over the summer, I was supposed to make a list of the top 5 2017 games on the PS4 so far, for one of the networks I do hosting work for, Obsev Entertainment. I thought it'd be disingenuous if I talked about games I hadn't played, so I popped in Persona 5 just to get a feel for it. And 20 hours later, I hadn't finished my research on most of the other games that I wanted to research as I genuinely could not put the game down. Persona 5 feels like playing through an anime, with each story arc feeling kinda like a season of a show. It includes a mini dating sim, as you can date various female characters in the game, and its combat system during the dungeon segments is incredibly fun, balanced, and includes a Pokemon element of being able to capture various personas that you can then use in your arsenal. I sank over 100 hours into the game without batting an eye, and I'm not sure if that's sad, but it's certainly the mark of a good game. Number 1. Zelda Breath of the Wild. Similar to Mario, I've always been a giant Zelda fan. Each announcement of a new Zelda game gets me excited, as they've always maintained an extremely high quality, and as they aren't pumped out like some other major franchises. There's a long enough break in between games for me to get excited about a new one. And I know that makes it sound like I'm biased, but that doesn't mean I've loved every Zelda game. Skyward Sword, released in 2011, I enjoyed, but it also had a lot of elements I was disappointed by. In fact, there were other games that year I enjoyed much more, including Deus Ex, Skyrim, and, not surprisingly, Dark Souls. And one of the most disappointing things about Skyward Sword was the lack of the ability to explore. One of my favorite things about playing Zelda games is feeling like an adventurer, going through an unknown land, discovering its secrets, and feeling like I'm mastering my surroundings. While Skyward Sword failed at this, Breath of the Wild ramps it up to the absolute extreme. The entire game is purely about exploration and what new thing you'll find around each corner. While I've never been the biggest fan of the open world genre, by giving players the ability to climb, you're never limited. You can explore every single nook and cranny you come across, and any obstacle that comes your way, you can find a way to climb up it or around it. And I think it was this ability to climb that truly immersed me into this world. It's also one of the only games in recent memory that I've regularly talked to my friends about what we've discovered and shared stories about the shrines and items we found. Anytime I picked up Breath of the Wild, I didn't want to put it down because I was so immersed in this world and having such an absolute blast exploring it. While there admittedly were some flaws and things I wish were handled differently, such as the blandness of the 120 shrines you'll solve puzzles in, it doesn't take away from the fact that this was the game I spent the most time with over 2017 and most enjoyed my time with. There were several other games I played throughout 2017 that could easily make a top 10 list, as this year was so stacked with incredibly good games. I'm sorry, Sonic Mania, you were really good and finally a good Sonic game again. I'm sure everyone's opinions will differ, so just to reiterate, these were the games I enjoyed the most in 2017. That said, I really would love to know what games you enjoyed the most, and if there's any games in particular that you specifically recommend that I should check out. So let me know, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.